So what we're doing today is we're working with the oil pastels, but I'm going to show you a few new techniques for how to make gradients and for how to make some cool effects as you get ready to use the oil pastels to create your final abstract compositions. So you're going to find the box that we created that says light and heavy, and I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, but if you hold farther back on the pastel, this was my complaint on your last project, that too many of you went too lightly. And what happens is it leaves behind this very staticky effect. So when you're working on yours and you're demonstrating for me, please use colors that are dark enough for me to see. Don't use yellow, right, on white paper, because I'm really not going to be able to see it well in a photograph. But I want to see if you can actually color lightly and neatly so that I don't really see the zigzags. The reason why it looks staticky is because the paper has a texture to it. And so that texture has raised and lowered bumps that you really don't perceive with your eyes. You might feel them with your fingers. And so what happens with the pastel when you go lightly over the top is it actually only hits the top of the bumps and not the little valleys in between. What I want to see on this project as a final project is I want to see nice heavy application so that there is very little, right? That there is very little of the white of the paper that will actually show through. But we also still need to be neat in how we color. So please, 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 as you are demonstrating this for me and you are practicing it yourself, make sure that you are doing it neatly and cleanly. It's okay to have a few of these little spots showing through, but it should not look like that. We will use this technique when I teach you how to do a gradient in one of the other sections, but for right now, I want you to think about the majority of your project should be finished that heavily, so we see that little of the white paper showing through. Pause it if you need to rewind this, okay? Moving on to sgraffito, which is a really funny word. It's actually an Italian word. And sgraffito means to scratch through. We actually get the word graffiti from it because early graffiti back in ancient Rome was actually scratched into walls. So they didn't have markers back in the 100s. Okay, so we're talking about 100 AD or BCE. They didn't have markers to go tag on the wall. They didn't even have pencils. So the only thing they could do to graffiti or leave a mark behind was to carve their name into the walls. And so sgraffito is the same technique. So we're going to do this two ways. We're going to do it with just a single color, and we're going to do it with a two layers. So the first one is you need to have a color dark enough to be able to see. So this does not work well for oranges, yellows, or pinks. Does not work well for those colors. But you need to color heavily and neatly, okay? Heavily and neatly. And so you're gonna cover an area. This space should be the same size as mine, so color a nice big territory, kind of roll it around. Just like I showed you before, I want nice, heavy application of color. None of this thin stuff. Okay, so we barely see any of the white of the paper show through. And then you're going to take a mechanical pencil, or you can take a paper clip. I don't recommend a pin, okay? I don't recommend a pin because most of you will tear through the paper. But you're going to take your mechanical pencil and you're going to push the lead back in, so the lead's not there. And you should be able to scratch some designs into the surface. And what you notice is as you scratch those lines into the surface, and it really works better with a paper clip, you can create some pretty cool looking designs in your colors. So if you want to, you can totally use this to create some cool patterns in your abstract design. One thing you do have to be careful of is there's all sorts of little crumbs. So I'll try to brush them off this way. So as you're scratching through, what's happening is you're pulling some of that color off. So you want to be really, really careful, because now it's on my fingers, right? You want to be really careful to kind of brush that off your paper as much as possible, okay? So that it doesn't get mixed into your other colors, and then you're going to want to go wash your hands before you pick up another color. You can also do it with two colors. So I could put blue underneath. So I'm going to pick a lighter blue. I'm not going to press quite as heavy, okay? So it's still fairly heavy. You can see some of the paper showing through, but it's not super light. Color it down. And then you go over the top with your other color really heavily. I usually go a different direction. Okay, so I usually go a different direction because it helps to keep the color down on the surface, so it helps to keep the blue on the paper. And then once I've done that, I go through the same process, but this time when I scrape through, it should show more of the blue, and I'm going to use this just because it's going to come through better. So you can use another color underneath. I don't really recommend it because usually when you pull it through, you're scraping off a little of both, so you're actually pulling off both the blue underneath and the purple underneath, but you can, all right? It is possible for you to do both, and then you just brush off all those extra crumbs, right? Brush off all those extra crumbs. So you were gonna try doing sgraffito just with a single color, heavily done, and you're going to do one where it's one color that's lighter and another color that's darker on top. Pause it if you need to while you practice this, and then you can restart when you're ready. Next piece that I want to show you is called Impressionist Blending, and you did this on the last assignment. You took and made all of these marks in different colors, and when you made those marks in different colors, and I'm going to add this to it, you created this nice blotchy optical mixing. So this is another option for you to use in some of your shapes. And when you do Impressionist blending, it is a little annoying because you have to hear all the little tick, tick, tick of the pastel, but you want to make nice big marks and you want them to be somewhat heavy. So if you're going to do this, they need to stay neat. Don't get lazy and just kind of make them sloppy. You can do longer ones, okay? So you can do longer ones, but you still have to keep them neat. That means you're locking your wrist, all right? You're pretending your wrist is in a brace and you're locking your wrist when you make those marks. Then you come through and in the space, I'm gonna actually choose a darker color. In the empty spaces, I'm gonna add some other marks. So I'm gonna focus my attention on the empty spaces in between. Again, heavy pressure. Heavy pressure. Last project, not enough of you used heavy pressure. So nice, heavy, consistent pressure, filling in the empty spaces between colors. And then I continue to keep adding colors. I can make this really spectacular with all sorts of interesting colors that blend, but it requires time, right? Requires time, requires some attention to detail, and it requires some patience because this technique takes much, much longer to build up over time, although this technique is easier than some of the others I will show you today. And then last but not least, I might come through with one other color just to kind of smudge them together and create this nice, beautiful, kind of rainy effect. This only works if you're going to work neatly, cleanly, and heavily. If you don't press hard enough, you're not going to get the same nice, interesting smudged effect. All right, so that is another technique that you can use as you get ready to work. Go ahead and pause it if you need to at this point and try it out yourself. All right, value scale. There are going to be times on this project, because it's going to be required, we're reviewing things we learned first semester. There are going to be times where you are going to want to take a color and you're going to want to lighten it. So there's two ways you can lighten it. You can lighten a color with a lighter version of it, or you can lighten a color with white. All right, you can lighten a color with this, right? These two eventually will get lighter as I mix them together, or you can use white. I'm actually going to show you how to do it with white. And this is a little tricky to show you on a white piece of paper, but what I want you to understand is you are going to do a big value scale. So if you remember when we practiced value gradients in first semester where you have that nice smooth change from light to dark, I told you not to do them too skinny because when you do them too skinny, they turn into tornadoes. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a value scale with my darker color. So everyone's going to pick either a dark color and white or a dark color and a lighter version of that color. Now, I'm going to make my value scale and I'm going to make it pretty wide. So notice that's like most of my index finger, right, up to the second knuckle. I'm going to press really heavy at the top, and as I come down the paper, I am going to get lighter, 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 and lighter. So remember, we shouldn't see the zigzags. We want your lines to be nice and close together. You might need to go over it twice, but before you get to the bottom of your rectangle, I need to see some kind of a gradient. So you're going to go over it several times. Remember, you're slowly lightening up the pressure on it, like an airplane taking off. An airplane doesn't take off straight into the air like a rocket. It slowly lifts off over time because it's lifting up off the ground. Now, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. It's going to be harder to see because it's in white. All right, it's going to be harder to see because it's in white, but I'm going to do the reverse of this. So up here, it's heavy pressure to light. When I come back, so we'll label this one blue. When I come back with my white, I'm going to do the same exact thing, but this time I'm going to go heavy this way, and it's going to get lighter. I'm going to touch the paper lighter. So here we go. Super heavy here. Of course, it's white on white, so you're not seeing anything, but now what you're going to start to see is it starts to smudge, right? So I'm going to get lighter, 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 and I create a value scale, a gradient scale. I'm going to come back with my blue again one more time with the same effect, okay? Same effect. I want to make that blend out. And somewhere on your project, I want to see you experimenting with this idea of a color gradient. So remember, dark color first, you're going to press heavy, get lighter pressure, then you're going to come back with your lighter color, and you are going to start from the bottom, press heavy, and then it's going to gradually get lighter. It is rarely going to be perfectly smooth, and that's okay. You don't need to take your finger and smudge it. In fact, trying to smudge these doesn't work out so hot. So you're going to try a value scale, dark color, lighter color. If you decide to switch and go, let's say red, violet to pink, all right, so I'm going to go red, violet to pink. You're going to practice this twice because this technique is actually not that easy to do. So you're going to practice it twice. You're going to start with your darker color first, really heavy, nice and wide, okay, getting lighter. I'm wearing down a side of this, all right, so I'm wearing down a side of my pastel, lighter, lighter, lightest. I'm going to go back and go over it one more time so I get a better value scale. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to come back with my pink, and I'm going to go really heavy. And then, as I get about halfway through, I'm going to lighten up on the pressure of this. Still too much white of the paper showing, so I'm going to come back one more time and press a little heavier. You'll notice when you go over it the second time, the surface is going to seem a little bit slimy or slick. That's exactly what we want. Okay, that is exactly what we want. We want that surface to get a little bit slick because then your colors are actually blending together. So you're going to practice value scales twice. Dark color to a lighter version of that color, right? With white, dark version to a lighter color with a lighter color. And then, last but not least, for those of you who really want this to look good, if you want to create a color gradient, so you want it to be a sunset. Let me get this. I forgot my paper towel. Don't forget your paper towels. Okay, so I just wiped it off on my fingers. I don't want these colors to show up in my project, so I'm going to double check that all of these are clean first. I want it to look like a sunset, so I'm even going to get rid of that and get my pure red. All right, my red isn't clean, so I'm going to clean off my red on my thumb. All right, so I'm going to go from red to orange to yellow. All right, red to orange to yellow is my plan. And again, you're always going to start with your darkest color. Always, always, always start with the darkest color. And you're going to make that gradient again. So you're going to push heavy. Slide that over a bit. Push heavy. Now, get lighter, lighter, lighter. Remember, we want it to blend out. So soften that edge. Go lightly over that transition edge so that it doesn't look like this. It shouldn't just be heavy and then instantly stop. That heavy edge should slowly get lighter and lighter. And if that means you lightly go over the top of it several times to make that effect, then do it. Now, I'm going to backtrack. So it's going to overlap. Right? We're going to overlap. So I'm going to start up here and I'm going to press heavy. And then I'm going to blend this out, going lighter, 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 lightest. And I could probably go over that one more time just to make sure. Okay, last one. Again, overlap. Don't start down here at the edge. Start on top of the orange because we're going to make yellow orange first. And then we're going to go lighter, right? And get that nice bright yellow. So now what's going to happen is I have these really scratchy spots in between. I'm going to go back over the top of those now that I've blended things together. And with light pressure, I'm going to go back up and start to kind of clean things up so that eventually I get that nice, heavy, rich layer. And the farther apart you make those marks, the less of that color there is to mix in, and it's going to create this really beautiful color gradient. Your color gradient could be violet. So you could do a color gradient from violet to red violet to red. You could do a dark green to green to yellow green to yellow. All right, all of these will work because they're analogous. So we're going back to these vocabulary words that we've been looking at and we've been studying, and we are starting to discover how can we use these colors to create an interesting abstract work while we are learning about color schemes and a different style. So these colors are here for you. You are going to practice all of these, and I'll scoot back out of this. There we go. You're going to practice all of these and then take a photograph of it, and you are going to upload it into Canvas and turn it in for this assignment. You are not going to start your project until you have completed these and I give you a thumbs up, so that way you can fix anything or re-practice some things so that you have the best possible way of getting a high grade. Good luck.